That's Nick.
And that's Joseph. And today we're here to talk about the Wonder, the 8th film directed by Sebastián Lelio, which had a double bow out of Telluride and Toronto International Film Festivals earlier this year. Netflix has released it theatrically on November 2nd, and it is available to stream on Netflix as of November 16th, 2022. Today, yes.
Oh, hey.
We've been sitting on it for a minute.
Yes, like an egg. The director?
Sebastián Lelio, Chilean, who's directed Gloria, which is probably my favorite film of his, and he remade it in English as Gloria Bell, starring Julianne Moore. He also did Disobedience with the two Rachels, Rachel McAdams and Rachel Vise, as Hasidic lesbians. And actually, are they Hasidic? I don't quite remember the exact nature of that. And also A Fantastic Woman, which I did really like as well, with Daniela Vega.
This movie is like a creepy-ish drama.
It is. It's a period piece with underpinnings of a psychological horror film / social realism, almost.
Based on a book.
It's based on a book by Emma Donoghue, who wrote Room, which was turned into the film starring Brie Larson, and it has been adapted by her and Alice Birch, who notably wrote the script for Lady Macbeth, starring Florence Pugh back in 2016, which is, I know I've talked about that film before. It's a fantastic Florence Pugh performance, directed by William Oldroyd. Alice Birch has also written several episodes at least of Succession, as well as Normal People.
I could see the book being a very good read.
Same. Mm-hmm.
Because I think the story is very interesting. Mm-hmm. The way the movie is constructed, I will admit that I had a hard time getting through it in one sitting. I did accomplish it, but it was a little rough. The middle hour feels quite languid.
Languid I think is the perfect word for, technically the second act. It does have quite a bit of a dry spell.
Well, the basic story is, it's 1982.
1862.
Oh, 1862 in Ireland.
The Irish Midlands, yes.
And Florence Pugh is a nurse, and we see that she has been called to travel to some small village to work for a patient. So she gets to this little village, and the people who hired her are like the village council. Mm-hmm. And she's told that there's this little girl who's not eating, and you need to go and watch her. And we've hired 2 people, you and a nun. And it's important to know that the 2 of them are working one works like the day shift and one works the night shift. So there's round the clock coverage. And immediately Florence is like, I'm a professional nurse. I don't know why you brought me all the way here to just watch over some girl. Well, what's wrong with her? Well, she doesn't eat. And Florence is like, well, then feed her. Like in a hospital, if a patient's not eating, you force feed them. You just don't watch them starve to death in the bed. And the council's like, no, under no circumstances do you feed this girl. So we find out that the little, what is she, 11?
She's 11. She hasn't eaten for 4 months since her 11th birthday.
We're told that she has not eaten for 4 months. And Florence is like, well, that's not possible. She believes in science and it's not possible. Someone's giving her food. So the council's like, well, you and the nun are going to monitor her to see if anything's weird, because it's believed that maybe she's getting spiritual sustenance, maybe she's possessed or...
by Jesus, Jesus,
like she's a miracle or something. So they really want to believe this. It's very obvious with the time period and the location and these people's religious beliefs that they want to believe that she's a miracle and that their little village will get a lot of shine from it.
Well, yeah, because anywhere there's a documented miracle has happened, the tourist...
Right.
What's the word?
It becomes a tourist attraction, so they get to benefit from that. So the council has hired these 2 people to sort of prove that she's not eating and that she's a miracle. So then, for an hour, we see Florence dealing with the girl, and her name's Anna. She's spouting off a lot of religious stuff. The crux of why she's saying she's doing this is because her brother who's dead, she believes is in hell. And if she fasts, somehow that will atone for whatever he did, which of course is well, what did he do? And then that will get him out of hell. Mm-hmm. So Florence is committed to trying to help this girl, but it's not working. And then it's like the hour 15 mark when all of a sudden Florence has an epiphany, like an aha moment, which revolves around two things. The girl keeps saying like that she's being fed by
She's eating manna from heaven.
from heaven. So like spiritual food. And then one day Florence shows up to her shift a little early, and so the nun is still there, and she sees that the nun has like the girl's entire family, because the girl is sleeping in like a separate structure, like away from everyone. And Florence like, what the hell are y'all doing here? We're supposed to be conducting like real research and watching her. Like, you can't let these other people in here. It's contaminating what we're doing. And the nun says, well, you can't, I can't rob this little girl of her mother's kisses. So then at like the hour 15 mark, Florence is eating her little porridge and whatever. And she thinks like, oh, manna from heaven, mother's kisses. That mom, this bitch is feeding her daughter like a little bird.
Like Alicia Silverstone, darling, yes.
The mom is chewing up the food, and then when she goes to visit the daughter, she's spitting it in her mouth, which is obviously not enough. Like, the girl is still malnourished, but that's what's allowed her to live for 4 months without having a proper meal.
And how and when bowel movements would
wasn't that my first question?
Yeah, well, I guess if she's really not eating, because you're not sure at first there is a supernatural spiritual element. Like, I guess there would be no bowel movements, but this girl is.
I need to see the bedpan.
She's defecating somewhere.
But anyway, so Florence realizes this, goes and tells the council, and they're like, "You're lying." They bring the nun in. They're like, "Girl, did you see anything?" The nun is like, "No." So they
bring the girl in, and technically she's not lying. She's saying the same thing she always says: "Is I'm eating manna from heaven." She is literally eating masticated bread. But
so it's important to know there's like a reporter in town, because news of this like miracle girl has spread.
Played by Tom Burke,
and he also thinks it's bullshit. So he and the nurse are they fall in love, which we can get into that.
They're consumed by animal lust. Yes.
So Florence proposes to him, like, let's run off together. We can start a new life somewhere, and we can take this girl with us and save her.
And notably, they both have significant familial trauma in their past.
Florence has lost a child, and the reporter's family, like, died.
Well, they died in the infamous potato famine from the generation earlier. That we're told that they locked themselves inside rather than face the public shame of starving to death in public.
So Florence convinces the little girl to leave with her by telling her, like, hey, I know you're trying to do this thing to get your brother out of hell, but you can sort of like die metaphorically and then be reborn. So why don't we say that you let Anna die, but then we can go on ahead and let your next personality eat or move on.
And be Nan.
And you can be someone called Nan. So the girl agrees. So the way Florence gets her out of there is she absconds with her one night, takes her to her little boyfriend. They hop on a horse and go away. And then Florence goes back to the little structure the girl's living in and lights that shit on fire.
And prior to that, we learned exactly what happened to this little girl from her brother.
Oh, that's very important. Because again, it's like, why does she think her brother's in hell? Because her brother was molesting her.
Well, she was a sister wife.
They called it double love.
Double
because
love.
He was married and then was molesting his sister.
Not like Francois Ozon's double lover, a different double love. Yeah.
Yeah. So, girl's gone. Florence burned down the barn and also injured her hands a little bit. So she goes back to the council like, well, here are all my notes. Sorry about it. The girl went unconscious. I tried to resuscitate her and in the process knocked over a lamp, burned the shit down. And then the council's made up of like 5 people.
Yeah, we're all notable men. Brian F. O'Byrne, Toby Jones, Ciarán Hinds, and David Wilmot. And all of them ostensibly have nothing to do.
One of the guys is like a fervent believer that this girl's a miracle. Mm-hmm. And is very much like suspect to Florence. Another guy is like, this is some bullshit. Someone's feeding her. And then the other 2 are more like, well, one of them is the doctor he wants to become famous off this thing. And then the other one seems like maybe he's like the constable or something. He recognizes like what you said, that it could bring a lot of shine to the village. But so then they're sort of threatening her like, we could call the police. And she's like, no. First of all, y'all hired me, so you're liable for my actions, number 1. Number 2, do you want to be known as the people who are responsible for basically watching this girl starve to death? And they're like, good point. So they basically come to an agreement that we won't tell on you. You don't tell on us. In the papers, we're going to write that she was a miracle girl and then she died. And obviously, we're not paying you. So the final scene is Florence, her man, and Anna have now assumed new identities with the last name
Cheshire. Like the Cheshire Cat.
And they are all dolled up. They have a fancy dinner, and then they're on their way to get on a cruise ship to go to Australia to start a new life. And then the ticket attendant person is asking each of them their names. And when they get to the little girl, they ask her name. And she says, my name is Nan Cheshire. So now she's a new person.
Which, if you say it kind of quickly, sounds like some kind of deadly weapon.
The end. The movie is bookended with it's like breaking the fourth wall because we see like a sound studio with like the structure of like the buildings in the movie, and then someone saying
it's Niamh Algar who plays Kitty, Anna's sister, who kind of also knows what's going on more than anyone else in the film.
I didn't quite understand that. That must be in the book, maybe?
I don't know, but I felt like it was purposefully making us take a more active role because there's some line about that she's inviting us to believe in this story, which is all about, science versus faith kind of, and how both of them can kind of be used to diminish one, perhaps. I think it's something to do with that. It's asking us to be more active participants in the story and taking a stance. And, Florence Pugh's character's name is Lib Wright, and all I could think of is women's lib.
Speaking of Florence's character, she likes to get high off, I don't know, opium. She has some sort of liquid in an amber...
That'd probably more likely be laudanum than opium, but...
she has some sort of liquid in an amber bottle that she's getting doped up on. But then she also pricks her finger and then eats the blood. And then she has like a psychedelic experience.
Well, she's also doing something with baby booties as well. I thought to signify something about her own kind of private ritual in keeping this notion of her child alive.
Oh, for sure, yeah. But I thought those were... They kind of reminded me of like... Because she does it twice. They kind of gave me like Midsummer vibes.
Sure. I think she'll always kind of have that carry her.
I shouldn't put that on her.
But, and also notably there's some conflict because she's English as well, coming into Ireland. And there's cultural conflicts there as well. And a good title for this, I think, would have been The Good Nurse.
Yeah.
Actually, or The Irish Patient. But there was a lot I really liked about it. I think the score is really well done, but in all actuality, I think the score is doing a lot of very heavy lifting in selling this as a film that isn't really what it is.
Right, because you would think there'd be some tension, but there is no tension.
And I think that's where the problem is, because Pugh's performance is really good. It looks great. I think it was shot by Ari Wegner of Power of the Dog. The mood and tone are there, even if it very peripherally is skirting around some of those tropes. But everyone else is really one-dimensional, including Tom Burke, who you might recognize as the heroin addict from Joanna Hogg's The Souvenir. Everybody's just very one-dimensional. And because of that, the stakes never really seem high enough. Like when she questioned the men's authority. This is 1862, and there is some...
They're more huffy with her than like threatening.
Yes.
And I thought for sure, for the time period and the fact that it's these council of men against this one woman, it plays off more like they're just kind of like, well, no, we don't agree with you.
Yeah, and not like I need to see another woman broken down in film again, but just something to suggest that her investment, to sell her investment, because I don't know that I believed why she would put herself... I
don't know why
she's sacrificing herself to save this girl, and but it really is interesting because her post literally is, what's going on, and you're just here to tend this dying girl, because the family really cannot tell the truth, because if they do, they will be excommunicated.
Well, can I just quickly go through my notes, and then I could say what I think the better story would have been?
Sure.
But there's a moment when Florence's character breaks like a little figurine, and then a lock of hair falls out of it and gives it to the girl. What was that about? Was that her brother's hair?
I'm not sure. I think that is when the film is playing with some red herrings about making us think some kind of spell has been cast on this girl.
Okay.
Is what I thought about that initially. And notably, the girl, Kíla Lord Cassidy, is the real-life daughter of the woman that plays her mother, Elaine Cassidy, who you might know as the titular Felicia from Felicia's Journey.
You think I know who that is?
No.
Oh.
But speaking. I'm breaking my own fourth wall.
Good job. There's a moment where Anna is like coughing because she's sick, she's malnourished, so like a tooth falls out, and there's kind of a icky scene where she spits up like blood and her tooth is
Scurvy.
And all I could think of is like, shout out to all the healthcare workers, all the nurses who have to deal, like when people are just at their worst and, you feel gross and then there's someone there to care for you in a non-judgmental way.
Spit in my hand. Go ahead.
Yeah, so that's what that made me think of. But the scene where Florence and the little reporter have sex, I thought that was well done because it made me think like that's probably how sex was back then. Kind of just like very matter of fact and... it's probably not comfortable wherever they were. Like,
although I always think of the French Lieutenant's Woman, where Meryl Streep has to take off all these layers of clothes. Like there's a lot of things to take off too.
And then after they're done, it's just kind of like it's all very unromantic, and they're just kind of like, thanks, no, thank you.
But yet she still has an affinity for him, even though his first line to her is very demeaning because she's eating, and he's like, "Oh, are you eating for both you and your patient?"
Yeah.
I would have taken...
Well, because he assumed that she was probably in on the bullshit.
Oh, I don't know. I would have taken a minute to get over that comment myself, but...
Okay. The rest of my notes really relate to what I would have wanted the film to be because I really like the story. I just think that we needed to get to the business of this girl lying about eating earlier and then create tension around... So I think the first 30 minutes should have been the nurse shows up, meets this girl. She's a professional nurse. Like, she knows that there's no way this girl hasn't eaten in 4 months. We need to find out what's going on. She realizes that the mom is feeding her on the sly. But this girl keeps talking about, like, her dead brother. He's in hell. So then I think wrap that shit up really quickly. And then it becomes sort of thrilling about, first of all, why is this girl obsessed with her dead brother? What did he do? And then the politics of that period and people's religious beliefs and like, this family and this village are willing to sacrifice this young girl just to get a little shine. Like, I think that would have been the better story. Well, and that is part of this movie. I just think that we spend so long when it's like very obvious that I feel like it was very obvious that this girl is not possessed and someone is feeding her.
Yes, and even the reveal is not so much of a reveal, which means I think it would have been more interesting to kind of... Because clearly this family probably knew about the incestuous relationship of their children, so I think the psychosis and the fervor and kind of the terror of having that be discovered at all...
that could have worked really well within this story.
Yeah, I think we really needed to navigate that family a little better. Mm-hmm. Or the hot and heavy romance with Tom Burke could have been better attenuated as well. But as it stands, I think Florence Pugh really holds this up in a very subtle, fascinating way.
She's a good actor.
I mean, I think she kind of saved Don't Worry Darling from being a complete, altogether mess too. But
what else do you have?
That's about it. I enjoyed this movie enough, and I think it's... I don't know, I feel like the scores we're going to give are going to suggest we don't recommend watching it, but I don't know. I've liked a few of Lelio's previous films a lot more than this, and I don't know. It just feels very rigid somehow, even though it's kind of trying to be very playful with how it bookends itself.
Well, 2.5 out of 5 for me means that it was okay. I think this movie was okay. I had a really hard time getting through, like through the second act. Like, I was going to turn it off and then go to sleep and watch it the next day. But I was able to push through. And then I was satisfied with, like, the first 30 minutes and the last 30 minutes.
Sure.
It's just that middle part that was really hard.
And it's just this kind of female empowerment that it really is delivering at the end is also a little bit hollow because it's built upon something that I don't know if this is the best thing for all three of these people. Surely the girl, because she's going to live. But I don't know. They're willing to throw away everything they have to go to Australia. It's just missing a turn of something, and I don't know. I haven't read the novel, but I would be interested in reading it.
What would you give it?
I think 2.5 is fair.
Anything else?
No.
Hit the thanks button. Listen to our podcast. Bye.